the game industry or game tools specifically are being used in all these other industries like architectural or animation, movies. We were seeing The Mandalorian using digital sets of Unreal to kind of help not bore the actors, right, in front of a green screen. So we're seeing like these revolutionary ways to work now, and being integrated so importantly in these industries. Are you seeing like this influx of other developers that have been coming into substance tools that are not used to it, or now like loving it and discovering it, along with all these other tools that we game developers have been using for years now?
Oh, Francois, we can't hear you.
Oh, yeah, we got cut off. So I'll go ahead.
Sorry.
There we go.
No, I'm here. I was just muted. Do you want to go to give some examples to dive into that, Jeremy? Or
sure, there's some of examples. I don't know if I can talk about any of it because a lot of things is confidential. But there are tons of like Francois said, industries that come to video game because that's where, if you want the best visual quality with the best feedback iterative loop, you need to go with real-time solutions, and all those real-time solutions come from the gaming industry. So we see tons of other industries picking up Unreal, Unity, game engines and game tools to build, for example, VR experience, but not only. Also, they use it, as you said, for VFX, even in the design process of consumer goods. Of like a lot of luxury brands, for example, or car brands will use real time in the design phase while they build a car, they conceive, they design a purse, and so. The game technology allow them to reduce those iterative loop extremely to an extremely fast turnaround. And obviously, it looks better, but also just save them money just because of the fact that instead of designing a purse, instead of actually having to source the leather and build that purse in real life to see what it looks like, you can just design it in Unreal or any other package and see it pretty much as close as possible to reality. So you pretty much every kind of industry in the world is looking at real time to basically save money. Oh, I can't hear you anymore. Sorry.
Sorry. I muted myself. Our poor Francois. It definitely helps, with not eliminating completely, but at least limiting the post-production process in what these industries or other industries are pretty much used to, and they're kind of changing the workflow and stuff. In my experience too, I want to kind of throw this back at you, Jeremy. Like, our game development tools have been evolving for the last 20, 30 years, going through, I always track it to the Sony console generation. It's just easier to track it. PS2 to PS3 with normal mapping, and then moving on to lighting and rendering and ray tracing now. Game developers have been kind of there every step of the way. But like now these industries are kind of they're kind of have to fast learn all these tricks, basically. How have you been wrapping their head around this concept of just game development? I mean, how challenging has that been?
It depends on the industry, I guess, and each industry is different, and each player in the industry is different. We'll see some companies picking up those new technologies super fast and creating stuff that is really crazy quality in a short amount of time. And you'll have industries where we've been trying for years to bring to kind of evangelize real-time 3D and game tools, and it's still hard. It really depends. I think it depends on how critical that transition to digital is for each industry. and how far they were in the first place. We see some, like in the design industry, there are people that are just really very proficient with 3D already, and that are picking up these tools just because, again, it's a pipeline issue and a cost issue that they need to address now. Other industries, like, for example, architecture, are a little slower because they've been doing 3D for a long time, but kind of an old school 3D. And for most of the time, it still works fine for them because it's static, and then they may not need, or they may not feel the need to have real time 3D in this industry. So it just depends. They're all kind of more or less slow to adopt or fast to adopt. But I think in the end, every industry and every single company in the world will likely use 3D, real-time 3D, that is.
Definitely. I kind of want to throw this back over to Francois. I think you're about to start, but I want to hear your thoughts about this.
Yeah, sure. My take is that there have been 3D in other industries for a while, but mostly for manufacturing processes. And of course, automotive or architecture have been using 3D for dozens of years. But it was for a completely different purpose. And today they are discovering that visualization in 3D is something that is using different methods. And if you really want to achieve high quality and interactivity and be able to reuse easily your assets for a lot of different purposes, you have to do that using the techniques coming from the game. And also what it brings, the real-time thing that is happening these days, as you were saying, with the new console generations and all that, is that in the past, interactivity was at the cost of visual quality, but it's not really the case anymore. For a lot of use cases, you cannot, unless you're a specialist, you cannot really make the difference between an offline rendering and real-time rendering, depending on the use cases, of course. But for a lot of use cases, the difference is not that big anymore. The gap is not that big anymore. So it means that previously, as a creative professional, you had to work in a kind of abstraction, and you were working all day long on something that was an abstraction of the final product, the final media, the final sequence, or it's not the case anymore. Now, with real time, you can iterate directly on the final product, and it is changing everything. And this is also why Adobe is embracing 3D today, because if you look at the other tools at Adobe, they are all real-time tools, I would say. When you're working on Photoshop, you're not working on an abstraction of the final image. You're working on the final image. And if you change a pixel, you change a pixel in the final image. In 3D, until recently, you were working on something that was an abstraction, lower quality, simplified geometry, simplified lightings, simplified materials, and then you had to render. And this abstract phase, they meant that people who were not specialists were unable to predict what the final result would look like. It's still completely the case for very advanced 3D like VFX, and you were talking about Mandalorian, or of course, when you're at this level of extreme quality, you still have a difference between the final product and the different steps before. But for more everyday purposes 3D, I would say, now you can go real time and you can iterate in real time. And we see this happening in many industries, in the game industry, obviously, but also in the other industries. And it's changing everything.
Well, speaking of changing everything, I kind of want to dive a little deeper on that. Of course, increasing workflows, increasing speed can mean two things, right? It means that we can get quality faster, but it can also mean that producer want more things at once, right? And so I kind of want to talk about that. Like, what type of workflow changes that this is creating for all industries right now? Do you think the quality of product, of course, with large teams, are going to get better, but that being even truer with the smaller teams, even because now tools are so accessible, and you're using essentially the same tools at bigger studios to produce the same level of art. It just depends on your time. I want to hear you guys' thoughts of how the last 2 years, especially, just influx of great tools like Substance and other tools. How has the changes been from your perspective?
So I would start rapidly with saying that at Substance, we don't differentiate our tools depending on the level of proficiency or on the cost of the tool. It's very important. It's a very important choice we made, and students today get Substance for free. And it's exactly the same product as what AAA studio would use. So there is absolutely no differentiation in the product. So the accessibility of the tools is key to spread them, but also to make sure that the industry has enough people to hire, and that the know-how can fluidly go from the bigger studios to smaller studios, from students to studios, etc., etc. I think this is an important choice we made on the Substance side, and this is something that is part of our success probably today. And the result is that small studios have exactly the same tools as big studios. So creativity wins in the end.
Yeah, that's pretty good news for everyone, for sure. So I want to ask you, Jeremy, like, with all these tools being better, and we're talking about, the oncoming new consoles that are basically going to up our quality and output at the end of the year, right? So my question is that with all these tools coming out, and especially every console generation, let me kind of go back a bit. Every console generation is defined by the lighting and rendering pipeline and texturing, right? From the normal map to ray tracing now. So what is the next leap that we're going to be seeing with the next console generation? Is it going to be more quality stuff, or are there different techniques that you feel? And I see Substance being at the forefront of defining what our quality and next leap is. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there are some just obvious things, like we'll have higher resolution textures, obviously, and higher poly counts and more complex meshes. But I think we'll probably truly differentiate this new generation. And I think we saw it with the very few images that we've seen of next gen stuff. Is first the shading. I think the last generation we had the PBR shader, the advent of PBR shading, and that kind of caused a big leap in the realism of materials in general in games. But it's in most games today in the current generation, it's still fairly limited. You basically have a color, a roughness, a metallic, and a normal map, and that's pretty much all you have in your shader, unless there's some specific cases. I think the next generation we're going to see materials get much more complex with much more complex material reaction, like sheen and clear coat and thin film. There's all sorts of physical properties to materials in real life that the simplified PBR model we use in the current generation does not account for. And I think this will really bridge the gap between the rendering you see today and what could be seen as like a real life object or photo. That's one thing, and especially applied to characters and that kind of object. I think we're going to start to see characters that have a quality in, at least in cinematics, maybe not in gameplay, but in real-time cinematics, they will have the same quality as what you would find in VFX today. The second part is also I think linked to characters is I think we're at a point where we finally have the power and the knowledge and the algorithm to do proper hair, fur, and clothes simulation in a very realistic way, which was kind of we had some of that this generation, but it was very kind of approximations and tricks and kind of cheating. I think we're going to get and we already see that with some. There's some papers from in Unreal and in Frostbite. There is already some interesting work on that. I think we'll see in the next generation characters that are really lifelike. I think that will be the big leap.